first panel of the day, a very topical issue. Everyone is talking about it. Big ideas. What will shape PropTech in 2021? So let's have our speakers slide there. We have some very eminent speakers joining us today. Let me first introduce our moderator of the session, Mr. Sandeep Sethi, Managing Director, Corporate Solutions, West Asia, JLL. Sandeep has over 25 years of experience in the corporate sector, and in his current role, he is responsible for providing strategic direction to the business, strengthening client relationships, new businesses, and ensuring excellence in service delivery. Sandeep is part of India Leadership Council of JLL as well. Thanks, Sandeep, for being here today and for chairing this session. Let me now introduce our eminent speakers in an alphabetical order. First of all, let me introduce our panel member, Mr. Amitabh Satyam, Chairman Smart Transformations. Amitabh is a former managing partner of SAP and the former global leader of telecom and IoT consulting at IBM. His book, The Smart City Transformation, published by Bloomsbury and co-authored by Professor Igo Calzada of Oxford University, in fact, is a global reference book for developing and operating smart cities. So a very eminent panelist we have here today. Thanks, Mr. Satyam, for joining us. Our next panel member, young and dynamic, Govind. He's the co-founder of Insomniacs, and in fact, he is a PropTech strategist who has over 10 years of experience in real estate consulting with focus on building technology platforms to bring in automation in real estate. You know, something which we definitely need in real estate, Govind. His company specializes in automated marketing mix modeling for real estate to drive best ROI with the help of data analytics, AI, and machine learning, something which we will be definitely talking about in this session. Our next eminent panel member is Ms. Nirupa Shankar, who's the Executive Director, Brigade Group. Nirupa is also a director at Brigade Reap, which is the first of its kind tech accelerator in Asia. She has conceptualized some of Brigade Group's projects and businesses, and she oversees the operations and strategy for the company's self-managed assets. Nirupa, a very warm welcome to you. It's always a pleasure to have you at our panel and to hear your wonderful views. So we will be talking, asking you a lot of tech questions in this session today.
Thanks, Sapna.
Our next very eminent panel member is Mr. Rohit Gera, Managing Director, Gera Developments Private Limited. Mr. Gera is a third generation entrepreneur, and let me he's double major in building construction project management and economics from the University of Massachusetts and advanced management degree in real estate from Howard University. And no doubt he is best known for his innovative thinking, which is reflected in differentiated product lines and customer engagement initiatives that he has brought about in the company. Thanks, Mr. Gera, for joining us here today and sharing with us the developer's point of view.
Sure.
And our next panel member is Mr. Srinivas Khandavilli, who's the Director, Smart Building Solution Architecture at Microsoft. Srinivas is part of the application and incubation team supporting the Microsoft Real Estate Services Group. The group sets standards, supports implementations for the Microsoft Global Real Estate portfolio, and he also works with the broader set of Microsoft partners to drive industry innovation in the global PropTech vertical. Thanks, Mr. Khandavilli, for joining us today. In fact, our special thanks to Mr. Srinivas because he is joining from US at a very inconvenient time. So thank you for being here with us, and we look forward to hearing your views. Sandeep, over to you. All the eminent panel members are all yours.
Thank you, Sapna. And just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. Any one of you, please. Thank you, Nirupa. I got it. Thank you. I think Murphy was watching out for me. Just as Sapna started speaking, I lost audio and I called Dolly. I said, is it just me or everyone else too? I think it was just me, but in good time, I'm back. So thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, panelists, for taking time out. It's an interesting topic that we're going to talk about. PropTech has been a subject of interest for many, many years now. And increasingly, it became a topic that was catching everyone's attention over the last few years. They said that 30% of global PropTech funding was coming into India over the last few years. And I think what COVID or what 2020 has done is it's changed a lot of things from a prop tech perspective. We are seeing new themes, we are seeing new use cases. We certainly see new opportunities for prop tech companies. In the past, prop tech was focusing on addressing solutions for challenges that were very traditional, which probably had many solutions in place. But in the new world, we will see prop tech addressing challenges that are relevant to the new world. We'll see prop tech opening new doors for different players that never had even thought of entering into the prop tech world in the past, perhaps. We're starting to see certain themes becoming very important for a lot of occupiers, a lot of people in let's say properties beyond just commercial space, residential as well. You're starting to see health, safety, mental well-being, overall well-being becoming so important. Sustainability has become such an important topic for most organizations. We're starting to see touchless technologies becoming almost an expectation uh, for every occupier. That's obviously going to bring in a lot more people into the prop tech world. So what we want to do in the next, I would say 50, 55 minutes or so, is to just go around the panel and get everyone's perspective on how they see this world, the changing world of prop tech from their respective lenses. So I'm going to start off with Amitabh. Amitabh, given the vast and diverse use of real estate technology, what is your interpretation of prop tech?
Great. Thank you, Sandeep. The prop tech or the is actually not new, and it has become more relevant, and especially amongst some of us because of COVID. But the COVID may have accelerated a few things by maybe a year or two, but the general trend hasn't changed. The way technology was enabling several processes will continue to happen, most possibly because of the fact that we are not physically together and we are remote. That the transformation we see in meetings. So similarly, that transformation will be in real estate as well in technology space. So large number of things. The first of all, the construction industry itself is like so old, and it's a $10 trillion industry. So even if we are able to use technology to save even 5%, we are talking about $500 billion. We can run a couple of Pakistans with that. Just that kind of savings. So it is huge. And when it comes to, and if you apply technology properly during the construction phase, I was reading somewhere that you can do about 50% labor savings. That's another couple, that's close to $1 trillion there too. So the technology interventions is not just to have a 3D view of interior of a new apartment, but also real savings that will add to either the profit margins of the builder or passed on to the consumer. So if you look at technology, there are about 4 different ways of looking at how technology enables some of these benefits, and I'll come to those benefits another time. First one is during the construction phase. So the construction phase and the project management phase, we have people, we have material, we have time, everything is expensive. And of course, we have to ensure quality. So technology comes into all these 4 or 5 areas, and it reduces cost, it improves visibility, it provides you real-time data, and it provides, I mean, of course, the artificial intelligence is commonly used. You don't have to do artificial intelligence, just creating live data visibility, and you are able to assess risks better, you are able to cut costs better. So these things combined during construction and project management phase itself, you are able to save 20, 30%. That's very optimistic, but let's target 15 to 20%. That's huge. And so that is one part of it. And of course, the timeline shifts as well. Similarly, if you are, once it is, the building it's constructed, you're talking about taking it to market. So you are selling or leasing. During the selling and leasing process, there are a large number of technology, though most of the startups are actually focusing on this state. That how do we provide the information to the buyers and the sellers, how to provide artificial intelligence enabled technologies are helping buyers find the right properties and the sellers identified qualified leads. So some of these things we are able to do by measuring 10,000 sets of data points that we weren't able to do before, and compiling and all this data into meaningful outcomes. And this third one is obviously operations and maintenance. And then we are talking about predictive analytics or predictive maintenance for your equipment. You are talking about optimizing temperature, minimizing energy, providing more secure access. You can have facial recognition for attendance. So large number of technologies coming from everywhere. So I think when we talk technology, we are talking about information technology, and information technology powered by analytics. And analytics includes artificial intelligence, machine learning, and IoT. These two things, analytics and IoT together are transforming not just prop tech, but actually the rest of the world. But prop tech is, see, the real estate is about, depending on how you look at it, 40, 50, 60% of the world asset. And that is where the first intervention is required by technology, and I think we can see that today. And the overall outcome of any technological intervention has to be reducing cost, reducing inconvenience, reducing energy, because that's in the sustainability concept, reducing material used, again sustainability concept and the cost concept. So all of these things are possible today because of interventions of technology, by providing the visibility, and of course we cover several points. So
Great.
that's my initial thought, Sandeep.
Very well summarized, Amitabh. I think you articulated very well how PropTech can help the entire life cycle of real estate asset, right from design, construction to operations. And you said 15-20% savings is easy, but even 5% savings could be enough to run a few countries from a GDP impact perspective. And you're right, PropTech's impact should be tangible. It should be around cost, sustainability, and convenience. Can't forget convenience, because ultimately we have to make lives simpler, make lives easier. Otherwise, the adoption is going to always remain an issue. So well said. Thank you. Srini, I'm going to go to you next. 2021, what according to you will shape up PropTech in 21?
Yeah, so I think 2020 has definitely set the barometer of what could change, right? So we saw that up close and personal. So going off of what Amitabh said, first let's break down categories, right? Design, build, and operate. I'm going to focus on the operate part because that's the area I play in. And I think there are two mega trends that I see that will kind of power this, at least that section of the life cycle. First is space management. With corporations, now potentially doing hybrid workforce, they would definitely want to know that what is the loading of their offices, right? There's no doubt about it. I mean, this is something that is going to be imperative to the real estate heads, because at this stage, none of us really know. We don't have that data, right, around, are people going to come back? Are they going to stay at home? How's this policy stuff going to work out? So that to me is definitely a macro trend. That's an easy one. I think the other one that, COVID has brought to the forefront is really the health of the building. And, I'm not one to chase the latest, but there's a lot of science around how the experience of the employee can directly be correlated to their productivity. And if you give them a more healthy environment, there is tangible benefit for corporations. Now, I see this as a specific area of a lot of innovation, given the fact that most buildings have disconnected data sets. So, someone is capturing the indoor air quality, but what are they really doing with it? How is that connected end to end and driving a tangible benefit, right, to them? So really, the bridging the divide between IT and OT worlds and delivering solutions that touch the occupants in the building. And finally, I'm thrilled to be here. Someone said at the beginning that I'm logging in from the US. I think this is a really wonderful showcase of what is possible, and we need to continuously really support startups. And I guess that's why I'm here today. I would love to see more and more innovation being driven out of India and see some global players come. So, turn it back to you.
Thank you. Well said. End-to-end connectivity and bridging the divide are the points I took away from what you said, and you gave some real-life examples of some applications that PropTech could address to solve real world challenges. Nirupa, I'm going to go to you next. You've been running a very successful PropTech incubator program. It's called Brigade Reap. Can you share with us your experiences of what's working, what's not working?
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep. Yeah, so actually, when we started Brigade Reap about 4 years ago, I had these lofty ambitions of, trying to find technologies to solve the larger, big problems of real estate. And for example, one of the biggest problems in real estate is probably from a customer's perspective, all the leakages and seepages we find in our buildings. So I fairly naively thought that, there would be some nanotech material that if we applied for during our construction or, change the quality of the cement that we use, that these would be easily solved. But I mean, obviously, once you get into the details, you realize that it's a much bigger problem than just a material problem. It's a man issue, it's a material issue, it's a method issue, it's a machine issue, it's a bunch of various different things. So what I have learned in the last 4 years is that, it's very hard to find technology to solve the big problems of real estate. But most of the technologies we come across, and, we run about 2 batches a year. And for each batch, we get about 125 startups applying. So that's about almost like 300 companies that we get to speak to on an annual basis. And what we've come to see is that, they're all solving one piece of the puzzle, right? One little process um, uh, in this entire process of creating a building. So there are some companies doing, of course, looking at it from a marketing perspective, or looking at things from a construction technology perspective, or from AR, VR kind of perspective. But there's no company that's really solving the big problems, or the very disruptive solutions that we all look for. Like things like, okay, if you ask what is the bigger problems, you say, okay, how do you resolve delay issues, or how do you resolve these leakage issues? So there's no one solution to these larger problems, but what these startups are doing is probably solving smaller issues. And the way I would like to bucket it is probably they're looking at how do I increase revenue, or how do I reduce or optimize my costs, or the third one is how do you enhance efficiency. And these are the small little processes that they look at changing in the real estate development life cycle. And that is what they're doing in their own little ways. The other big learning is that I thought, for technology adoption is obviously a problem in whichever industry you look at. And I thought, okay, maybe it has to be driven from the top. But I think my biggest learning is actually it can't be driven from the top, because there's a lot of resistance from the middle. So actually, I feel that in order for technology adoption to happen, it needs to actually be driven by the middle management. You need their buy-in. If any technology is to be used widespread within an organization, otherwise the top management can go on screaming whatever they want to till their voices go hoarse, but it can be used for one project. But if you want it to be used across an organization, that buy-in from the middle management is very important, and they need to be part of the decision making and the curating of a certain technology. So what we do at Reap is actually, a lot of these startups are not ready to be plug and played into with the developer. So we spend about 5 months giving them one live project to work on, to see how they resolve whatever operational issues they have, and try to see how we can plug and play them with any one developer. It need not be only Brigade. We have a lot of well-wishers within the developer fraternity. So and one of them usually step forward to say, okay, I like this technology. Let me see how we can utilize it. And then through this live project, we try to make these startups more plug and play, because once they work for a single developer, it's easy for other developers to try and utilize the solution. So I think a lot of the prop tech startups that we have come across, I find it very difficult to just say, okay, let's use this technology. They need a lot of curating. They need a lot of hand-holding to actually fit in with a developer's way of working with things. Because I think the hardest thing to do is to change somebody's behavior, and you have to try to find a way to adopt this technology without drastically changing anybody's behavior. So those are the learnings that I've, in a more high-level way, that I have learned over the last 4 years. Of course, I can get into the details of the nature of technologies at a later stage.
as he was speaking, Nirupa, I actually was thinking of what she was saying, and it makes sense because we see a lot of folks from outside of real estate getting into prop tech, and they don't see the larger picture because they haven't been exposed to it. Their experience
Yes.
has probably been in other domains, and that's why they try and solve part of the whole problem.
Yeah, and
And
it's
so
you're absolutely right. Most of the people who are starting these prop tech companies are not from the real estate space. And that's one of the reasons you also want to have this accelerator, because sometimes the biggest disruption comes from people outside of the industry, not from within the industry. So part of it is actually to keep your ears to the ground to see what are people thinking of. And many of these founders are customers in the space. They have had difficulty, say, buying a property, or they've had difficulty with all the some issues and snags in their buildings, and then they try to come up with solutions. So it's really interesting to see. I think it's energizing to see the solutions coming up, but you're absolutely right. Most, I would say, even 90% of the founders are outside of the industry.
Yeah, and that's why, to your point, hand holding them is very important. But the other thing that I
Yeah.
liked about what you're doing, Nirupa, is you're not just asking them to do a POC in a Brigade construction site, but you're opening up the entire construction ecosystem, talking to your peer groups and asking them to work with you so that the mass deployment becomes easier because you're already addressing a larger ecosystem in the upfront initial stages.
Yes, and I'm very thankful to my friends in the real estate space, because sometimes with a smaller organization, sometimes there are developers doing maybe just 4 or 5 buildings at any given time, and it's easier for them to sort of work with these new technologies rather than having the Brigade system try to churn it through their entire processes. Because the larger you are, sometimes the more processes you need to follow. So it's sometimes easier for the smaller developers, to actually go ahead with these technologies.
Great, thank you. Rohit, over to you. Another perspective from a developer perspective or developer lens. You obviously see something that PropTech will do for consumers and for your end users. What is it that you think PropTech will do for end users eventually?
Okay, so I think it's important to recognize that there's different parts in the entire chain, in the value chain. One is just on the construction side, and that's largely referred to now as construction tech. And when you look at it on the consumer side, there's one part which is the relationship between the developer and the customer or the consumer, and then post possession, there's the aspect about the relationship between the consumer and the property. So I think if you're looking at the relationship between consumer and property, I think there's a lot that can be done. But a lot of this is only to in a very large extent, to just automate things, to make things a little more efficient, and to make people's lives a little bit easier. If you go back one step to look at the relationship between developer and consumer, that's when the technology really can start delivering tremendous value. When you've got a lot of data which you can start churning, which you can start looking at trends, the developers can actually start using that to then start getting into solution-oriented algorithms, guidance-oriented algorithms for your leadership teams, and so on. So the portion which talks about just the customer along with the property, then really it's about a society management sort of tool, and we've already got a large number of those, right? And so those are in fact, those were, I think, amongst the first few sort of prop tech solutions which came into the market even 5 and 10 years ago, which was about managing a society, making your payments and all of that. The other aspect is if you're looking at managing the property from a rental and from a landlord tenant perspective, and that's I think a very different sort of space, and the entire opportunities there are again very different. But like I said, you can automate the one of the things, for example, that we're working on right now, right? Why is it that we provide gyms in our housing societies, and yet people don't know what time the treadmills will be occupied and what's the right time to actually go to the gym, right? It's so simple to kind of automate that, put it into your app, And you can just simply turn around and say, okay, I've reserved the treadmill from this time to this time. So these kind of things, these are utilitarian benefits, which will then improve people's experience within the real estate and their enjoyment of the real estate. So I think, that's the direction which I see this space, this moving towards. This then gets largely driven by the end occupier, not so much by the developer himself. So I think there's, very clear-cut, there's very clear-cut boundaries and there's very clear-cut segments in this whole prop tech environment, if you will.
It's a circle, isn't it? You bring in prop tech to help create better experience for your end users, which gives you as a developer better insights, which helps you create better experience for the users. So it just gets better and better. The more you use or the more you penetrate with technology, the better it gets for everyone.
So where the big gap then comes in is when we are looking at using this, to track the experiences up to the possession, we start gathering that information in our systems, right? But the moment you hand over or you do a handshake and you transfer the customer to one of the other apps which are available out there, you cease to get that usage data, right? And therefore, back to the point that was made earlier, that there are a lot of small little, pieces of this puzzle. And the bigger challenge is that these guys are not all talking to each other, right? In our organization, we have our own apps for quality control. We have something for the customer end. We've got SAP, we've got Salesforce. And then getting all of these pieces to talk to each other. And then if you try and bring, other things in, it just becomes that much more complicated. And then gathering insights and getting all those benefits becomes that much harder.
Right. And, in the past, if you look at just the residential complexes that were constructed, bringing in an element of prop tech used to be a differentiation for developers. But today I feel end users are willing to pay a premium for technology features in the complexes, be it security, be it wellness, or be it anything else, isn't it?
I think people are, in our experience, people are willing to pay for technology more within their homes, just as sustainability, right? It's a great word to talk about. I don't think consumers are willing to pay anything substantial or even a fraction of the cost that we incur to build sustainable developments. In the similar way, I think the really big challenging mindset across a large, across the majority, I think, of home buyers, and not the ones at the very top who understand the benefits, right? Across the majority is it's not a big deal to manage a housing society. What they don't realize is, 30 years ago, the only electrical gadget that we had was a water pump. And then you added an elevator. And today you've got, very high-end equipments in gyms. You've got water treatment plants. You've got sewage treatment plants. You have, addressable fire alarm systems. And suddenly the complexity of all of this is so high. But in the consumer's mind, I don't think they've realized that to manage this and to run this whole engine, if you will, requires expertise, capability, and therefore, so far we haven't seen a very large willingness to pay for a solution that manages this really well. I think it's not far before they actually start doing it, but right now for these things, I don't see people willing to pay for that. They would much rather pay for 10 square feet extra for themselves.
I agree, and that brings me to the point you started off with, the difference between construction tech and consumer tech, right? Construction tech is something that the consumer will not pay for because, they can't see it, they take it for granted. Consumer tech enters into their living space and obviously they see it, they touch it, they feel it, and they enjoy the experience, and maybe that's where it becomes tangible for them and they're probably willing to pay for that.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, we've seen that. Just take 1 second. We've certainly seen that when we offer, home automation within the homes. I think people are very happy to pay for that if they can control their curtains with the voice control and managing switches and managing power supply inside the home. Very happy to pay for that. Outside, not so much.
Yeah. Makes sense. Govind, I'm going to go to you next. Have organizations started prioritizing solutions around wellness, touchless technologies, and other aspects?
Absolutely. I believe the whole COVID scenario has pushed everybody with regards to the internal team communication, the way it used to happen, and now we are seeing the kind of progress that is being made. Right from the way the architect team would, interact with the developers, the construction team would be, interacting within themselves, the quality checks, how they are being maintained, and the owners, the middle management, everybody is getting a regular information. There have been technologies into the market, and people are now using them a lot more. And when it comes to the other side of it, which is the sales side and the marketing side of it as well, we have been seeing a huge amount of inroads being made where people are focusing to make the whole ecosystem a little more cohesive, where the ERPs and the CRMs are talking to each other. The post-sales team also now, the technology platforms which are coming in, how the data loss is minimum, the efficiencies can be made higher, and there's lesser human interventions. And these things are now pushing the whole ecosystem forward. And I believe, we would have been expecting these things to happen in 2023. Coronavirus, definitely has accelerated the possibilities of, the adoption of these technologies. And we see the same, emergence happening onto the site experiences as well. We saw, all the developers started adopting for, virtual, gatherings with their customers. Now, when the, sites are open, the traditional touch points are being made converted to digital. So these inroads are definitely kicking in, and I believe going forward, there is a huge transformation and revolution that is waiting for all of us, which will be pure voice-driven. I'm not talking just about voice driving the IoT, right? I'm talking about the enterprise solutions also being driven by voice, where I definitely imagine going at 2 years down the line, Rohit sir or Nirupa ma'am here, they're sitting in their car, they're just asking, hey Dorothy, hey Christopher, what's my sales update today? What's my construction update today? So the voice part coming into the enterprise solutions as well is a huge possibility for the future that we really are betting big upon, and we definitely are seeing the seeds are sown, and we shall soon see the results.
Good. And do you think the voice part that will come in will further drive experience and eventually adoption?
Absolutely. Yes. See, at the very basic of it, if you look at the Google Trends data, right, their search, the number of people who are typing and searching things before to now, even the regional areas, their penetration has increased because of the regional connect on the voice part of it. And I definitely see the adoption has been a problem, as Nirupa ma'am was talking about, the middle management issue. So at Brigade or at Gera's, this may not be a real issue, but at other places, it's a big issue, right? And when it's a big issue, the regional connect plays in, it kicks in. At that point of time, the comfort, imagine what can happen if it's all the enterprise solutions are driven by voice and all the things are actually automated and people are not, the whole behavioral pattern part that Nirupa ma'am spoke about, which is the real fact that, any technology brings in with it, the behavioral pattern change, which people are not very receptive to. But the voice part, that's the reason we believe that in an enterprise solution, that's going to be a huge game changer. And definitely it will, change the whole, possibility and the pattern of, adoption towards these technologies.
Makes sense. And if you zoom out of PropTech for a few seconds, having voice-enabled technologies will open the market to another India. Hundreds of millions of people
Absolutely.
who probably can't read or write, they'll have access to technology. So the adoption clearly will go up as a result. So thank you. Nirupa, I'm going to come back to you and ask you for some specific examples of promising technologies that you may have come across through Brigade Reap.
Okay. So, as I was mentioning, we get almost 120, 150 applications per batch. So it's always exciting when you come across, companies trying to do 3D printing and robotics. And there was one company I remember that wanted to use a robotic arm to do external painting. And external painting, as any developer knows, the real pain because of the scaffolding that you have to put up, making the entire building look ugly and incomplete. But what we found is, those technologies like that still have a long way to go because they're still at a fairly nascent stage. They can only I think with 3D printing, they were able to do a home up to about, say, 11 feet. And even this robotic arm could only go up to, say, the first floor. But where we really need them is for the higher floors. So those were just exciting things that we saw, but are still fairly nascent. But some of the examples of startups that we have actually used within our company, and while I agree with Rohit that nobody wants to pay for sustainability, initiatives or platinum LEED gold buildings, whatever it is, the demand for that is still there. So from a developer's perspective, I think there is this focus, especially because of the whole ESG focus that there is now from investors. So from a sustainability perspective, we almost 25% of our startups are in that space. For instance, we have WeGot, which is a water management solution for actually these large apartment complexes. And what it does is you just put in sensors at the various outlets, and eventually people can actually pay as per the usage of water consumption, as opposed to getting a water bill for the entire complex and then just dividing it by the number of apartments. And I feel that will be fairly easier to adopt. In fact, a lot of societies, apartment associations actually asking us to ensure that they cannot use this technology. So asking the builder to actually put in all the sensors as the building is getting developed. So we're seeing it being retrofitted in quite a few projects. So that's WeGot on the one side. There's EcoSTP, and that's a good one because usually there's this issue of smell and noise from the STP system, and usually you have a handful of residents who live close to the STP complaining about it. So we have EcoSTP, which is actually placed below the ground, so that the issue of noise is not there. And they use a chemical-free, it's zero maintenance, zero chemicals. They use some bacteria to help clean the systems, and they have some technology for that. So it's zero noise, zero smell, zero maintenance for at least 2 years. And if you need to maintain, you just have to change the filtration process. So that is that's what we're using in 1 or 2 of our projects. And then we have companies like Smarter Dharma, which basically help with the overall consulting of how do you make a project, say, zero discharge or zero carbon footprint. And that is where we want to head towards. We want to try and ensure that our projects are zero carbon footprint, at least for the larger campuses wherever possible. For asset management, like we are in the office and retail space. So I personally use a company called CRE Metrics, which basically tells me, suppose we have for our mall or our offices, if I want to know when a lease in another building is getting expired. So say a large MNC company is in a competitor building. I want to know when their lease is expiring so that I might pitch for that particular project. I use this company called CRE Metrics. It also helps for me when I'm pitching to a client to know what is this tenant paying in all the other projects close to me. It's probably useful for people like JLL as well. Construction technology, we use a company called QuickSpec. And the funny part is that even though construction is the core of what we do, I find very few technologies in the construction tech space, And QuickSpec is one of them. It basically helps with the whole desnagging process. You can use them for a variety of issues, but we use them to help us desnag. And, at one stage, we were able to reduce the number of snags from 100 snags per apartment to just 1 or 2 snags per apartment before customer handover. So that is how we've been able to reduce the number of snags. Prop PR we use for online selling because I think now through COVID, I think selling online has become pretty common. And so we use Prop PR to give your 3D walkthroughs and your virtual walkthrough of the entire project. So that helps us with online selling. And I think another good one that we have been using is Clareco for our office buildings and our malls, because it basically gets into your HVAC system. So they come in with their air filtration process. And it basically, every time the air passes through the filter, there's some UV, it passes through some UV rays. So then it kills all the bacteria that's floating around. So basically it helps with our HVAC systems as well. And again, these are technologies where with very limited human intervention. And that's why I said adoption has been a lot easier on these. These are just some of the ones that we've used. We've used quite a few more, but just 6 or 7 ones that we've used.
That's great. Thank you. It's so interesting to see how companies are addressing various aspects of either facilities management or the whole real estate ecosystem. And what was also interesting is to see how many of these companies repurposed their agenda in the last 8 to 9 months to solve real world challenges during the COVID lockdown, etc. We had one company that we were working with, for example, that was doing geotagging of field technicians so that the closest available technician could be deployed or dispatched whenever there was a breakdown call. And of course, there weren't many breakdown calls during the lockdown. So what they did was they used Google Maps to find the best possible route that could be provided to someone who wanted to avoid, let's say, hotspots, the COVID hotspots. And in literally 15 days, they went from one application of their platform to something that was so different but so relevant and so easy to flick the switch and transform to as well. But the fact that they were flexible, agile, and didn't have the blinders on was so impressive. And I'm sure you've seen some stories like that as well.
Yeah, that's part of what we do, help them pivot as much as possible. But I think it's easier the smaller you are. But really, it's the companies that have been the most agile during this COVID period that have actually seen some great results. Like you said, repurposing what they do, utilizing their resources to something more useful at that given particular point in time. So,
yeah. Great. Amitabh, I'm going to come back to you. How do you ensure in 2021 and beyond, PropTech becomes real, meaningful, and goes beyond just being theory in many aspects?
Yeah, okay. So typically for any cycle of technological evolution or innovation, there's always something in theory that creates huge discussions in conferences and presentations and analyst reports, and that kind of creates a pull towards that new technology. So everything has happened like that, cloud, AI, all of it. So yes, there is a lot of theory today. There is so for example, I know we every time we talk about technology, it's AI has become kind of synonymous with the new technology. And if you look at what Nirupa and Rohit said, there is very little of AI there they could actually be using. That is like much later in the value added chain, where AI would be able to create. I mean, there are AI is already inbuilt into many of these apps, but the core functionality of AI is that is giving information or insights that is beyond your normal linear analytics. It's not there. So yes, that's AI is still. I think AI is hype at this time, but that is the direction we are moving. It is there for everything, be it healthcare, or be it transportation management or factory industry 4.0. It's a hype cycle that is going to push everybody towards the higher value added chain, and then the higher value additions, and then it will become standardized. So yes, AI today I see is a little bit of an oversold concept. Similarly, robotics, like for painting that Nirupa said, or even using drones. The drones is a lot more convenient to do many things, including cracks that you can measure using cameras, and many things can be done, which is humanly impossible today or hard today. So these technologies are getting integrated, but I think what is missing today is an end-to-end perspective of how all of these things come together. So like I said, 3 major stages, the construction phase. How do you use AI? How do you use VR, robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and huge billions and trillions, well, maybe not millions of data points to bring together everything into a comprehensive solution? So Srini and my companies can also help, but there has to be an end-to-end solution that says all the tech integrated. So if a drone is going, capturing a video, it's sending the feed to some backend, which is using AI to analyze pattern recognition analysis of the crack, and that is reporting to somebody who is automatically pushing the new set of tasks to be done. So this end-to-end integration would be really cool to have. Right now, as Nirupa said, and Rohit also probably mentioned, is that bits and pieces to do each thing, which is fine. This is how industry evolves. And in 10 years from now, 5 years from now, a lot of these will come together as packets. But what is happening today is, like I said, some of these technologies are just about beginning. But think about typically in a modern building that I'm sure these people are constructing today, or ideally they would have like about 10,000 sensors. And data is created. We need data to do analytics. And what kind of data? How do you get data? Data has to be captured using these sensors. And these sensors are of all kinds, measuring. Each room can have about 10 to 20 sensors, or at least 5. And similarly, your HVAC system, your heating system, your water, the sewer management, all of it has to have some sort of we have to integrate these sensors. The sensors will create live data, and this live data will be fed into the AI system and or analytics system, and that will give you optimization for energy, for losses in water. And I mean, there are millions of or thousands of different kind of outcomes you can create. So I think today, what I see, IoT is my area of specialization. So I see IoT actually fundamentally transforming this construction and operations and maintenance. So that is one area. Of course, AI will be laden on top of it to create these insights. Basic
So
stuff
that
like
brings up.
yeah, surely.
Sorry, please.
No, I said basic stuff like security, attendance, facial recognition, those areas of technology for day-to-day running, optimizing space in an office. So, for example, there are people sitting in different places. What's the right spot for people to sit? Now, we have co-working areas. When people walk in, you don't want to open up air conditioning for a new, so you want to optimize how and where people should be sitting. So all of these things can come together, and that is happening today already. So no hype,
Great.
tons of stuff going on today.
It actually reminded me of what Rohit said earlier as well, that you have outcomes and you have insights, and the more insights you feed to the system, the better outcomes you'll get. And it's just a circle, isn't it? But from what it seems like is the folks that are working on prop tech solutions, they're focusing on the outcomes, but that whole AI layer or the machinery for AI to generate those insights, etc., is not mature yet. And maybe the skill set in the current ecosystem around PropTech is not there. And that's where we'll have to bring in other stakeholders to come in and address that part of the equation. Am I correct in summarizing that?
I disagree with that actually, Sandeep. I think
Okay.
the solutions that we're looking at for enabling or bringing in technology to transform some of the real estate processes will have to be brought in by process experts enabled by technology, people who have done it elsewhere. So what changes is the processes of either constructions or operations or the selling. But what doesn't change is how a sensor will create data now, and how AI will be able to capture the data and create business outcomes. So, for example, water supply. You can have sensors that measures water supply to each apartment, and similarly energy. Similarly, we have each. I mean, fire. We can go through like at least 30, 40, 100 different sensors: light sensor, sound sensor, person sensor. To I can walk into my bedroom and my TV turns on its own, knowing who I am and what channel I would like. Now, all of these things are possible today. Now, so all these technologies are not created by real estate people, right? Real estate people, so-called traditionally, have been specializing in physical construction. The digital layer on top of the physical layer, we use the term digital twin. Digital twin is conceptualizing or abstracting the physical aspects of physical properties of a building or any object for that matter, and then creating a digital twin to understand how the whole building or the civil infrastructure is being projected onto digital infrastructure. So this room may have 20, 30 parameters that is being measured. We abstract it out, push it into digital world, and boom, once you have in digital world, you can do all the AI you want. You can all the analytics and outcomes and controls. You can put the system, turn the light off, turn the air conditioning down the moment I walked out, and stuff like that. So stuff is going on already, and it will be done by people who are super experts in their own areas. They'll just apply it to real estate.
Makes sense. Thank you. Govind, to you. I'm just conscious of time. We want to have 5 minutes for Q&A. So Govind, if in 2 minutes you can help us share your perspectives on what do we need to do to further develop and nurture the ecosystem around PropTech, that would be great. You're on mute, I think, Govind.
Yeah, sorry. Sandeep, I believe what we just spoke about, what Nirupa ma'am started out with, I believe what Brigade Reap is doing is fantastic. That's a stepping stone that gets started. I've personally been part of one of the cohorts of Brigade Reap, so I know how it really changes the perspective. And I was coming from a service service side of the whole story to now owning the whole product line. The element is we need 20 more such Brigade Reaps, I believe, in India to start and nurturing them. The challenge that she spoke about is totally right. That the higher management, I met Rohit sir's team as well, Rohit sir as well, and I know that the kind of vision they have for their company, but the penetration below, and for them their teams are still good, but other places the adoption has been a big problem. So somewhere the thought leaders have to come out, create strategies to ensure these startups do not really need funding, right? They actually need validation. They need some opportunities. And the third and most important thing, I believe, which Gradai and Naretko, they can do in each and every city, if you could have just some hubs, even JLL, for that matter, right? Some hubs where these PropTech guys would come together, collaborate with each other, because in normal case scenario, I'm pretty sure right now we have collaborated with two of the Brigade Reap companies. In a normal case scenario, we would have gone to them, they would have said, hey, who you are, right? But this becomes a platform where, the whole walls go off, we can, interact with each other. So going forward for the nurturing, a lot of it, where the developer ends are there and these bodies in the real estate fraternity who are there, they can really create some scenarios, some spaces, some curated sessions. And even CBRE, JLL, they have to step a little more forward to really take them through the whole journey, give them more opportunities, and not just about having awards and taking them towards funding, but the mentoring over a period of time and making them aware about the opportunities and the need gaps and the problems that everyone faces. Probably we will have a much better evolved scenario in the future.
Okay, great, thank you. Rohit, how has COVID-19 impacted the whole PropTech investment landscape?
So, real estate developers' primary focus is, for the most part, is making sales, right? So if you have something which helps you sell, it gets adopted much faster. Then there are those who are execution focused, and they would then adopt the technology faster on that side. So I think one of the things is adoption of technology, because and a lot of real estate developers, and I'm talking at the mass level, right, aren't that professional, are still family owned, family managed, family run, and therefore the focus on PropTech maybe in one domain or one area. And to specifically answer your question, those are extra investments. Those are, nobody looks at those as something which is mandatory. And when time comes to tighten your belt and you don't have surplus cash flow to deploy on future improvements, I think the first thing are these kind of discretionary expenses which get pushed back. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of the PropTech and we've invested in a few ourselves, and we find that the developers have pushed back their investments and their efforts, and not just because of COVID over the last few years, because the sector has been struggling, that people really haven't had that extra money to go out and invest in improving their systems, because they're just living to fight another day, right? So I do think that as a result of COVID, people have realized, and so as have real estate developers, some of them have struggled because they didn't have, they weren't using Microsoft Teams, or they weren't using any of those kind of systems. A lot of them had the pirated softwares, and therefore, moving into a fully connected sort of high productivity environment was really difficult. So I think we will start seeing developers now recognize the value of having the technology, and as the real estate market sort of turns around, which we started seeing, I think they will start deploying more and more capital towards improvement of both the customer experience in the property, the customer experience with them, as well as their own production capability. So I think the future looks good, and I do think that the past and COVID has certainly dampened the enthusiasm that might have been there amongst developers to actually deploy technology to deploy PropTech, really.
Thank you. Srini, probably the last question before we open it up to the audience, and we're right on time actually. What do you think we can do to influence the ecosystem and to also increase the adoption of technology?
Sure. Hey, before I get to the question, I want to give you a compliment of excellent moderation, right? It's hard to really balance all these perspectives. I love coming to these because I can hear the developer perspective. I come in from an owner-operator perspective, and it's always fun, and I think you've done a phenomenal job of summarizing it. Now to your question. I think there are two aspects. I think one, Nirupama really brought out, adoption if you don't see adoption, you're never going to invest. And adoption can't be a tops-down thing. And I've lived and breathed this every day. So, I mean, truer words have not been spoken, Nirupa. I think that's very key, that the cultural shift, right, is critical. The second aspect that I think is absolutely imperative is the people who are paying for prop tech should not have a transactional view of those activities. Because so what do I mean by that? It's easy to invest in something like Rohit was saying, yeah, if I invest in the sales tool, I get X out. Great. It's a very tangible, thing. But I mean, can we look past that and say, if I make this, and I'm not saying it just because I'm from a owner operator perspective, but can we take a look at how we push the industry ahead, right? It's great to do transactional stuff, but what are we doing from, a new envisioning perspective, right? And all it takes is one developer like a Brigade or what have you. I mean, it could be anyone else. They set the bar. So one of the things, I mean, I spent about 9 years in India. It was interesting to me that, who was that one person who said, I have millions of square feet in Bangalore, right? And I'm going to make my buildings top class. And I'm not just saying it from a certification perspective, not just from a lead perspective, right? I'm going to make mine thing. I will invest early, right? And people will see the difference and I will be preferred. And that's a leap of faith, right? Because the investment comes before, you start seeing higher rental returns. And even the overall market has been of where there's been very high demand. So intrinsically, there isn't a lot of real push to say, should we invest? So I would just close out with a call to developers or people who are building real estate. Let's make this stuff better, right? And the benefits will follow. All it takes is one. So that's my sincere belief.
Great. That's a great way to end the panel discussion, at least our internal Q&A session. I'm going to turn it over to Sapna to moderate the audience questions. We probably have time for maybe one question.
Yes, we have few questions. In fact, one question is for Srini. Given in your experience, one of the viewers has asked, what are the, out of all the innovations that we have just spoken about, what are the immediate needs of the sector? Which technologies are the immediate needs?
So again, it's all about perspective, right? And that's what I was just saying. I mean, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me per se, it's about one of the things we're doing at Microsoft. Just to give you an example, I drive solution architecture for 17 buildings in Redmond, and that's my charter, right? And we focus a lot on employee experience, right? And there is that category of real estate where people who own real estate will make those investments. So if you ask me, I would say yes, employee experience. And what does that mean? Is their lighting correct? Is their their thermal comfort taken care of? Is there are they breathing fresh air? Is the water that is in the building, is it at a optimum quality? We are talking about all kinds of experience. When they come into a parking garage, are they able to find a spot? When we have visitors come in, are the visitors, acknowledged, right? And while these things might, again, it's hard to pin a ROI on this, but I can guarantee you that people feel the difference. And I hope that these things are not just limited to owner occupied. It should be more broadly expanded. Now, if you ask me more broadly speaking, I'm fairly well versed with what the ecosystem is doing. I think, companies like PlanGrid that really, focus on the front side of, optimizing the construction process, absolutely phenomenal ROIs, right? Anything to do with safety. So I track a lot of drone companies. My daughters love drones, and so yeah, obviously I gotta like drones too. And I'm looking at these drone technologies that actually look out for safety of workers and even security. So So those kind of things. So it's a very broad question, I would say. It depends on who you're asking, but there is so much potential of technology. I've lived and breathed this stuff. I'm a tech guy who went into real estate. And I've found it fascinating about, because the scope is so large, right? So I hope I answered your question.
Okay, so from your perspective, the consumer experience and safety, you feel they are the much talked about, or something which are the immediate need, and as you mentioned, drones is something that can come in handy. Mr. Gera, your view on that? What could be the immediate technology needs of the sector?
Oh, I think Srini said it right. It depends completely on where each person is in his own sort of journey, right? And there's so much. I mean, the opportunities to add value to our businesses is so vast. And so my view is I can't answer that to say there's one thing specific. I just my call to action to every single developer is, if you're not doing it, just do it. And if you're already doing it, please do more of it. Because I think as the industry evolves and we start getting deeper and deeper into this, the benefits that one can see are tremendous. An integrated organization, for example, the kind of things that what we've now started needing to do is we're putting in place our own sort of technologies, because all these various pieces, to get them to plug in, talk to each other. We started the 5-year warranty. We have an app to manage that. We have child-centric homes. We now have an app to manage all of that. These pieces now get integrated, and the benefits to consumers are tremendous. So my call to action to the community is to those who are in the prop tech space on the developer side, not the real estate developer side, onto the entrepreneur side, is keep doing what you guys are doing, and to the developers, just adopt anything. Just get started.
Okay, okay. So rather than the technology, I think it's on the other side. The industry now needs to, as you said, call to action. They have to get to adopt these innovations. Sandeep, there is also another question. I'll leave it to you, who should be answering that. They have said that while there are a lot of disruptive technologies which are now coming in, and as the panel was also talking about the behavioral change in the industry, but the leaders, the business leaders, will also have to change to adopt these innovations. So that is what the question is, that what technologies are there, but the adoption has also to be there.
So I have the tough job of assigning it to Amitabh. So Amitabh, can you take a shot at that, please?
So that's excellent question. Actually, the business owner who is a promoter, or probably is the person, he or she is a little older and not as adept. So it is understandable that they may not know. But the moment anybody shows an ROI, they would adopt. So it is an ROI-driven decision making by the top management that understands very well what is going to give better returns. So that's like any other business decision. Technology adoption, whether you use drone to paint, or do you use drones to lift bricks, or use a manual labor, all of that is decided not because it's a cool tech quotient, but it's because it's a good ROI. Same thing with the consumer. Inside an apartment, most people are driven. I think Rohit mentioned that, is that it's a cool quotient of technology. If you just do this and something happens, you love it. And we say, Alexa, close the window or turn the lights on. So these things create more excitement, and they have to also give a good return to the builder. So obviously, any technology, it's just a matter of business rate of return on business.
Okay,
Adoption.
Fantastic. We'll take one last question, although we are getting many others. We all know Indian budget is around the corner. So the question is, what are the expectations of the prop tech segment from the budget? Sandeep, your call.
Nirupa, would you like to take a shot at that?
I think the government has been pretty. I think they have supported the prop tech space. I mean, not prop tech. I would say the startup space a fair amount. I think it's setting up, just making the ease of business a lot more easier for startups to come in there, probably a little more tax rebates. But, in general, I found that they have been fairly forthcoming already, especially with their Startup India initiatives. I think recently they had another initiative with their whole Make in India concepts. But I think in general, trying to make the laws a lot easier for startups, maybe reduce the taxation impact on these companies as well. But that's about it. I think in general, they've done a fairly good job already.
Okay, great.
If I could
Sandeep,
just
you would
add,
like to
maybe
add something to it?
yeah, maybe they could legislate some of the PropTech changes in the building itself during the construction phase. I think that would drive some of the outcomes we've been talking about.
Okay, great. So, Sandeep, I leave it to you to sum up the entire session today, what we have just spoken.
Thank you, Sapna. Look, it's been an absolute delight to moderate the session. I've taken a lot of notes, and I'm not just going to leave the notes in the office and go back home. I'm going to actually mull over these and use it in my internal discussions later as well with my team. Got some really good. I got a story forming in my head, and if I could just summarize it in 1 minute, what I learned, I'll say. And it doesn't include everything, but some of the key points is, of course, the vibrant ecosystem that we've seen that's driving PropTech in India is growing. And there's a strong business case to sustain that. I think the current COVID situation has only made the business case stronger. It's opened new channels for opportunities. The opportunities that exist to make this whole PropTech space stronger, I see three. One is, of course, to look at it with a holistic lens and to not just focus on bits and pieces. Of course, you can focus on bits and pieces as a starting point, but eventually the opportunity is to bring it all together and look at it from an end-to-end holistic perspective. The second is to go from just driving an outcome to getting a lot more insights as well, which will further drive outcome. And the third is, of course, it's a volume game. So you've got to drive adoption. And of course, voice was one thing that Govind talked about as well, which will drive adoption. With that, I want to thank the panelists once again, and Sapna, to you as well for this opportunity you gave me. I really appreciate your time. This opportunity. Thank you.
Same to you, Sandeep. Thanks for that wonderful moderation, as Mr. Srini also said. And thanks to all the speakers. Mr. Srinivas, special thanks to you for joining us at an odd hour here. And thanks all our other speakers, Nirupa, Mr. Rohit Gera, Govind, Mr. Amitabh, Satyam, and Sandeep, of course, to you as well. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your time.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sandeep. Thank you, Sapna.